And we are live. Hello, welcome to Off the Cuff. My name is Ben Campbell. I am a social and dating coach for men. I help people with social matters, dating matters, productivity some of the way. The format of this show is that I take viewer submitted questions from my online coaching community, which is discord.gg/self-improvement, link in the description. And it's called Off the Cuff because it's completely unscripted. I answer in a very rambly, off the cuff sort of manner. I'm completely unprepared. I'm not even wearing pants right now. I am joined by my friend Anton Toya. Anton, say hello.
Hello guys, I'm also not wearing pants for the information. I'm just following my role model here.
It's good. We gotta not wear pants. All right, so let's fire on and get started. Have you got anything you want to bring up or talk about before I go into viewer submitted questions?
I actually do. I wrote down
right.
some things throughout the week. So yeah, first question, I was like talking to somebody who had a depression, and I was wondering how to deal with this, and also how can you help as a friend with somebody who has depression?
Okay, it's starting off with deep questions. All right. I mean, I'm not a therapist, and the emotional matters are not at all my speciality. So before I go into this, I want to make it clear that everything I say should be taken with a grain of salt. I'm absolutely not an expert on mental health matters. That being said, I have gone through a fair deal of mental health issues myself, and I used to be a incredibly depressed person for a number of years of my life, and I got to the point where I was, contemplating methods of suicide and things like that, and I managed to get myself out of it. So I'll approach this from my own perspective and share the things and like the tools and the mindset that I personally used and things that I have seen work for other people. But I think that mental health is a very personal and subjective thing, and so if my answers don't resonate with you, then I don't know, maybe perhaps seek therapy. I think that the way that we feel is heavily tied to the way that we think. I think that everything in life starts from thought, whether it be something that you're making, something that you're creating. Like name anything that exists in the world that didn't start as a concept or a thought in human reality. Like this desk that I made right now started from someone thinking about, look, I need this, and they conceptualized it in their mind and then created it in reality. And how this translates to the way that we feel about things. When something happens in our lives and there's an event that makes us feel bad, or something that happens that causes us to question ourselves or feel a certain way, it's not the event itself that is creating that, but the way that we interpret it and the filter that the perspective that we filter it through based on our experiences and our internal beliefs and our subconscious programming, essentially. And I've used this with money talks before. It's like if you believe that rich people are assholes and that to be rich you have to do bad things, then you're going to look at rich people and think badly, and you're probably going to remain poor for most of your life. Whereas if you look at those people and you're like, oh, well, maybe they did something good and provided value, then you are more likely to act in a way that creates that. And I think this is exactly the same with depression. I think that depression is often a symptom more than it is the thing itself. I think it is a manifestation of something deeper, and that deeper thing is your own self-perspective and the way that you view the world. And whether you're depressed because of trauma or because of events that have happened, or just because of the way that you relate to other people and the way that you see things, I don't want to say it's your fault, but it is your responsibility. So when I was depressed, I was looking at myself, and I had a horrible self-narrative. I was constantly telling myself bad things, and I felt bad a lot of the time. And I was creating dysfunction in my own mind in the way that I perceived myself in relation to the world. And the way that I fixed it was over time deciding that I was going to change my own perspective. And I think that there's something I read a while ago, and you'll need to fact check me on this, but I believe it was from Zen and the Art of Happiness. And they said that the cells in your body and there is the concept. Let's go to the concept of neuroplasticity. If you think in a certain way, you are creating patterns in your brain that make you more capable of thinking that way. If you feel a certain way, you're creating patterns in your cells, in your brain, in your body that are making you more capable of feeling that way and more likely to do that. There's less resistance because the bridges are like, if you go out into the woods and start whacking a path, at first it's going to be very tough, but eventually you'll have like a nice smooth paved path that you can traverse. And it's the same with the way that we think and the way that we feel. So the more that you are used to thinking and feeling a certain way, the easier it is to slip into that. And then it becomes a habit, and you become you become that person. It becomes part of your identity. It becomes rather than being a conscious process. So right now I can choose to think, well, I'm going to think about green kangaroos or something, right? I can choose to think about that right now. And if I start thinking about green kangaroos every day, at some point it's just going to become an automatic process, and I'm just walking around thinking of green kangaroos all the time. You can do this with your beliefs, you can do this with your mindset. So people that are depressed, I think something has happened, or some they've usually had some kind of experience, or they've taken in something from the world which is negative, and then they've affirmed that to themselves and kept repeating it until they reach a point where that becomes their self-identity. And they feel bad because they believe that they feel bad, and they continue to feel that way. And sometimes it's like underlying trauma that they're unable to face. And so it's easier. Like for me personally, a lot of my own depression was a symptom of underlying shit within my psyche that I was unable to really look at and face for a while. It was too painful for me to really acknowledge the things that I was actually feeling. And so it's a lot easier to feel a little bit bad and to numb yourself for a long period of time than it is to go into the root of the thing and feel horrible for a short period of time in order to overcome the thing that's actually affecting you. And most of the time when people have some sort of trauma, they don't even know what it is that is affecting them until they do that sort of reasoning. And going back to the habits and the vortex thing I was talking about, it's like if you the way that I got myself out of it was telling myself that every day I'm going to get a little bit better, and I forced myself to change my mentality, and I forced myself to change the way that I looked at the world. And over time, I didn't jump from depressed to happy because I had built the nice smooth pathways of being miserable. But over time, I went from this like terrible, awful fucking position where I hated myself, and it's like the world was just fucking grey and miserable, and I just felt bad all of the time. And over time I moved from there to like sort of feeling less bad. I still felt bad, but I felt less bad, and I was tracking my progress. And then as I kept reinforcing more positive things, I went from like, oh, everything's terrible, to everything's mediocre, to everything's kind of okay, to everything's great. And then over time I started to feel better about myself and my position in the world, which then gave me more power to actually do the things that I wanted to do. And I think as well, something that happens when people are suffering from depression is that all of the things that they want to do, like sit at home and isolate themselves and stay away from things, are all of the things that, if you do the opposite, will help you break that pattern. So for example, with my coaching clients, people get like people get controlled by the fears that they have, and so they don't take certain actions, which reinforces their fears, which reinforces their beliefs about the world. And so they believe like, I can't just go and talk to people, I can't meet pretty girls, I can't this and I can't that, and they shy away and hide from it, which reinforces that negativity. And I think it's the same thing with any mindset, and it's the same thing with depression. If you're telling yourself certain things about the world and you don't do anything to change that perspective or fight against it, then you're reinforcing that perspective, and it keeps being cyclical. Whereas if you break out of that and you're like, okay, I'm depressed, but I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to go out, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to do the things that I don't want to do right now because I have low energy in it. And rather than telling yourself, oh, I have low energy, and feeling miserable and staying in bed, if you get up and start doing shit, eventually things will change. I have never, like, even people that have been diagnosed as quote unquote clinical depression and given anti-anxiety and SSRIs and all these kinds of drugs, I've known people like that who have got through it by just changing their perspective on things. And you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, well, you have something wrong with your brain. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. I think that depression is something that is, if it lasts long term, it might not be your fault that you feel that way, but it's always your responsibility to get out of it. And I don't believe for a second that there's anyone on earth that is just doomed to suffer. I think if you have that mentality, that is why you feel that way. And so going to the second part of your question, where you're asking, is there anything I can do as a friend to support these people? Sometimes it really depends. And I think it's important to have good friends around you that show you that you are worth something and try to pull you out of things and like push you to do the things that depression tells you not to do. So you're like, no, fuck you, like get out of bed, take a shower, we're going to go out, we're going to go talk to some people, and people start to feel better when they do this. But sometimes there's just so much resistance there, and they've dug themselves so much into this thing and it's become such a heavy part of their identity that they can't let it go. And so sometimes you do just have to accept it. It sounds really callous, but people choose their own way in life, and you can't decide for other people how they're going to think and how they're going to feel. You can try to motivate them, you can try to help them as their friend, but if they're just pulling you down, sometimes you got to cut that rope. And I've had people like that in my life. Like I had a friend when I was younger, I'm not going to name him, brilliant guy, like really brilliant guy, but he had some horrible experiences within his family, and I watched it happen over time. He slowly started to get into the mindset of depression, and it became his identity. Like he was constantly going around telling people, "Oh yeah, I'm depressed and I'm miserable," and he was getting pity, which was a sort of like sense of affirmation for him as well. Like people were confirming his feelings, and so it made him feel like I think anything you experience in life, whether it's good or bad, you gain some sort of enjoyment out of it. It might, like, I think negative enjoyment is a thing. You can feel joy and passion, all these things, or you can feel miserable. I think either way, whatever consciousness exists behind us, and the thing that is experiencing that's behind the ego or whatever enjoys it. I think we are here to experience things, and whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So even if you feel bad, if you're getting something from feeling bad, whether it's an affirmation of identity or pity from people, like there is some sense of fulfillment that you get from that. And I saw this in him, because it's like nothing you could say to him would change. He just kept reinforcing the fact that he felt bad. And everyone I meet that is in that state, it's like they're blaming everything outside of themselves, but I think that's because it's difficult to actually do the work and face the fact that it is your fault, especially if you've been in that state for a long time. And so I meet these people, and I've had friends like this that I've sadly had to cut ties with, and it's like it makes me fucking angry, because all of the things that they're saying, like it's a reflection of their belief system. They're going, yeah, I'm depressed, and oh, this bad thing happened to me, and oh, why does life suck so much? It's like, because you keep telling yourself these things. Like everything is a manifestation of the way that you think. It's all internal. Because the things that you believe and the thoughts that you allow yourself to think dictate the way that you feel about the world, and they dictate the actions that you take, which dictate your results. So if you're finding yourself going, oh, the world's terrible and this and that, it's all internal. Because there are people that are out in the world going, the world's amazing, and horrible things might happen to them as well, but the way that they perceive them are different. And the example from the book that I mentioned earlier, the Zen and the Art of Happiness, say there's a football game. There's two sides, they're playing football, one of them wins, one of them loses. Half of the people in the crowd go home miserable, and the other half go home ecstatic. It has nothing to do with the football game, but about their perceptions and attachments to it. Yeah, as the friend, you can try. You can certainly try. And I think tough love is I mean, it depends on the person. Sometimes it takes a gentle hand and a sense of understanding, but sometimes it takes tough love. And some people want to feel heard and validated, but honestly, a lot of the times with people with depression, that doesn't help, because you're just validating their negativity. And sometimes it takes going, get off your fucking arse. What the hell is wrong with you? Like, get up and take some responsibility. What are you doing? And giving them things to feel empowered. And this goes back to the self-worth thing that we were talking. It was either last week or the week before, and we were talking about self-worth. You need to create things in your own life that feed back into your sense of self-worth. And if you're not doing that, if you don't accept that there is some difficulty and some challenge in life, and that you need to go out and force yourself to overcome some sort of adversity, so that feeds back into your positive sense of self, then you're just spinning your wheels and going in circles, and nothing ever improves for you. It's everybody's individual responsibility to dictate how they feel and the things that they get out of life. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
And the beginning can be so, yeah, it does. It does. And the beginning can be so hard, because most people are like in the victim mindset.
Yeah.
And this is so hard to get out of in the beginning. But once you're out, and once you make the positive momentum and change in your life, I think then it's like, it can be really powerful.
It comes down to responsibility. The people that don't change are blaming everything external for their situation, and you can look at that and you can be like, oh, well, it's their fucking fault. But I do empathize, because I existed in that state for a long time. I was like, oh, woe is me, the world is terrible, why do I feel so bad? And it took me going, I'm going to change this to actually make a change. And it's very difficult to do that, because you have to, especially if you've been going through this kind of state for a long time, because you have to accept that you could have, like, it's like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. The longer that you've been reinforcing these things, it's first of all harder to change, because they're so ingrained, and it takes more momentum to pull yourself out of it, because everything is pulling you back. But at the same time, it's like, if you've been depressed for a number of years or whatever, and you're looking around at the world and you're like, oh shit, this is all my fault, it's easier to just reject that and continue to exist in that state and validate the identity that you've given yourself, than it is to do the really difficult work of pushing through it. And as I was saying earlier about depression being, I think that depression is more of a symptom than something itself. realizing that you have some underlying shit that you need to deal with, it's going to be even harder than just the mundane state of depression that you've been existing in. A lot of people just can't face that, and so they ignore it, they switch off, they reject it, and it sucks. It really sucks, but I think we all choose what we get from life, and whether you realize you're making that choice or not doesn't make it any less of a choice. And you can't, as it hurts as somebody's friend or somebody's lover or somebody close to you or not, to see people existing like that, but you also do have to accept that it's not your responsibility, and if those people can't accept help, then there's nothing that you can do for them, as cold as that seems.
Yeah, exactly. And in a way, sometimes you have to be like a little bit delusional to believe you can reach something, and once you actually believe you can do it, like maybe it's not on the same as like becoming happy from depression, but for example, in sports, if you're in a way crazy enough to think that you can be a world champion one day, like it becomes a possibility through thinking, okay, what's the plan? What's the sub goals? What's the long-term goals? It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, I do.
Life becomes a hell of a lot more fulfilling when you take responsibility for like once you accept that everything in your life is up to you. Everything. It's terrifying, but it's also very freeing, because you realize like, oh, I get to choose, you know. And most people go through their entire life living off of the perspective of other people. They let their environment and their family and their friends and the things around them dictate their perspective, which then dictates the result that they get. And it's easy to do that, especially if you're living in a sort of if you're just sort of coasting. Like, nothing's really bad, but nothing's really great either. It's far easier to just turn off and let yourself coast than it is to take all of the responsibility for everything in your life. But like, who people are like, oh, you know, it's just how life works. You can't control the cards that you're dealt, but you can control how you play them. And it's like, if you don't accept that your life is your responsibility, then whose is it? And if you don't accept that the thoughts in your head are within your control, then whose control are they in? You know, if you're not in direct control of your own thoughts and feelings, who is? And maybe that's another question for another time, because that gets into like conspiratorial territory. But you know, why do you think the way that you do? Why do you feel the way that you do? And who benefits from that? Yeah. Anyway, let's move on.
Very good point. Yeah,
Someone said in the chat, just realized how well your pickup video did. Congrats on the success. Thank you very much. I think it's the start of something very good. The video's got like 900 views in the first couple of days, which I'm really happy about. I hope people see the value in it. Sorry, what were you saying, Anton?
On to my next question. So like, sometimes I heard people from the pickup community say like that people with a high body count are not good to date. And they say this because of the reason that they have like so many emotional relationships, like romantic, and for them it's very easy to break this instead of like pursuing it to the end, you know, or like go for it all the way.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah. This is a very pertinent question, because this is actually something I've been thinking a lot about, just in terms of myself and how I feel about the world and my own actions. I mean, I have seen those clips. It's like people on certain manosphere podcasts where they're like, oh, the less the less man a woman has slept with, the more that she's able to pair bond with you, and the higher her body count, the harder it is for her to maintain a serious relationship. And I don't think that's just about women. I think that's men as well, and I've experienced that myself. And part of it, I think there's a healthy aspect and there's an unhealthy aspect. Part of it is, yes, as you sleep with more people and as you have casual things with more people and you have relationships with more people, it does make you less capable of holding something down, but that can be for one of two reasons. It's either just because it's raising your standards, and I've experienced that with myself. It's like a lot of people that I date now are great for something casual, but they are, sounds very cold, beneath my standards for what I would consider to be something serious, because I know both what I want and what I'm capable of getting, right? But there is also the other side of it where it can become unhealthy, where the reason that you're sleeping around with a number of people is not... So I advocate for healthy casual dating especially amongst young people, and especially, you know, when you're first starting to get into dating, I think it's a terrible idea to rush into something serious, and you should explore the market and date as many people, and do it in a very honest and healthy and upfront way, where you're being direct and clear with people about what you want and what your intentions are, and don't rush into anything. Even if you want to get into a serious relationship, wait like 3 to 6 months of dating someone before you do it. Because as you date a bunch of different people, it gives you the necessary experience and the necessary information to decide what you like, what you don't like, and to get the experience within relationships to navigate certain things. You become better at like solving problems, and you figure out, maybe you think that you have an ideal for something, and then you get that thing and you realize that you don't like it, or vice versa. And so if you do this over time, and you do enough of this, eventually you get to the point where you know exactly what you want, and you're capable of finding it and maintaining it. But it can also cross the threshold into, well, now I can get most of my needs met by casual dating, and so why would I ever bother settling into a relationship? Or you might have some, like, you're rustling, buddy.
Sorry.
Or you might have some like emotional intimacy problems, which are preventing you from having the thing that you want. And you're like, well, it's easier for me to just disconnect and fulfill myself through casual things than it is to do the scary thing, which is committing to someone and having that level of and there's different kinds of people. I think some people are meant to be monogamous and some people aren't, but I think you really need to question your own internal motivations for certain things. And this is honestly something I've been asking myself recently, because I've been doing the casual thing for a long time, and I'm beginning to ask myself, it's like, do I still want to do that? Like, is it for healthy reasons, or is it for vanity reasons? Am I doing this because I'm trying to, like, I had a rough childhood and I was emotionally isolated from people and from women, so now I'm trying to prove something to myself that I can sleep with any woman I want? And like, I've had a lot of experience, and I'm getting to the point where it's like, well, do I want something more serious? Do I actually want an open relationship like I say I do, or is this a result of something else? And whatever those answers are for me, I think it's important for your own self to really interrogate these things, because I see a lot of men out there that are doing the casual relationship thing, and they're doing it for bad reason, either because they're scared of commitment and they're unable to actually, like, man up and do that, or but like there's just some kind of trauma or something within themselves, or some sort of ego thing that is pushing them to behave the way that they behave. Yeah. Well, sorry, could you, going back to your question, what was it?
Yeah, you basically answered my question. The question was if it affects
oh yeah, if it affects your ability to hold down a relationship,
like, a long term.
Yeah, I think it really depends. It depends on your own mentality. I think that whatever you, again, going back to identity, whatever you think and believe is what's going to be true. So if you're doing casual dating, you should really truly examine what your motivations are. And I do advocate for it, even though I'm sort of beginning to move away from it in my own mentality. I still think it's a very healthy, positive thing. And it can be a very healthy, positive thing. And like you say, you can get to the point where you have the experience and you have the information, you have the skill set to get what you want. But at some point, and we've talked about this before, people have this grass is greener mentality. And when you have lots of options and when you've dated a lot of people, it is easier when you're in a relationship to look at a person's flaws rather than looking at the things that actually make them good. And you're not really being rational about it. And so I think in most relationships, there are periods where the intimacy dies, or something happens that causes you to feel less about that person, or to look at them in a different way. And what really defines a good relationship in those periods, because a lot of people base their decision making in relationships on how they feel, and I think that's a terrible idea. I think you should look at things, I mean, feelings are very important, but you should look at things objectively and ask yourself, what does this person bring to my life? What do I bring to theirs? How am I showing up, and how are they showing up? And is this actually right, and can it be worked on? Because I think in those relationships, and especially committed ones where it's like sexually exclusive and it's just like monogamous life partners, there's always going to be periods and rough patches and arguments, and it's up to the level of compatibility, like how do you both solve those things, and be looking at it, and if you genuinely value and like that person and see them as a positive in your life, and you can show up and choose to, like, I think that love is, because people think of love as you know, certain people you love and certain people you don't. I think that you can feel that way for anyone, and you can feel that way for yourself, and the feeling of love itself is something that exists within you. And all that is happening when you're in a relationship is the other person is allowing you to access that part of yourself and to give it. And some people have issues with giving love, and some people have issues with receiving love, and that's a story for another time. But it is a state that exists within yourself, and when you're around that other person, something about them is allowing you to access it. And when that goes away, you might blame that person, but really sometimes it involves looking at yourself and going, well, how can I show up and choose to exist within that state? And I think that doesn't just apply to relationships, that applies to everything. Like, what can you do in your life to feel more empathy and to feel more love and to feel these positive feelings that you want to feel? Because it is all internal. And what about that other person pulls that out in you? And what doesn't? What pushes away and closes it off, and why? And I think these are all very important questions to ask yourself if you're considering something serious. And a lot of the time, what happens is people fall out of the quote unquote love, or even worse, they go through the honeymoon period and they think that that's going to be the basis of the rest of the relationship, or they get like the butterflies and excitement. It's like, I've had a problem in the past where I've only been very excited about relationships with very emotionally unavailable women, and this is how to do with like my relationship with my parents and shit that happened in my childhood. But I have chased after very emotionally unavailable women in the past, and they're the only people that I've felt that like butterflies and excitement. I'm constantly going after them, but I realize that the feeling itself is actually unhealthy, because I'm trying to force them. I'm like, let me give you everything and then I'll force you to love me, you know, and I'm chasing after that sense of validation. Whereas if I look at relationships that I've had that were actually healthier, the way that I felt in the interim, it was safer and more stable, and the connection was better, but it wasn't as exciting. And so I've looked at that and gone, well, this isn't right. Because my metric for what love should feel like is that butterflies and excitement, even though every time that has happened to me, it's been very unhealthy. And these are all like, it's a very, I'm not a relationships coach, I'm a dating coach, right? I can get you to the point where you are meeting people and connecting with people and getting into the initial stages of things. After that, there's a hell of a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself about, why do I feel the way that I feel, and how do my behaviors manifest, and maybe what's coming from my childhood or my relationship with my parents, and the relationship that they had that's affecting the way that I perceive things, and all of this. And these are questions that I've been asking myself recently, just because I think I'm reaching that stage of my life where it's very important to do that.
To do some deep inner work on yourself, to resolve some inner childhood traumas and stuff.
Yeah, and ask yourself what your motivations
you said something
are.
Very motivations. In the beginning, it's important to date like a lot of people, like casually. And I think I'm still in that phase, and currently. And as soon as I have like lots of experience, I can like choose in a more healthy way and know what I like in people.
Yeah.
But I sometimes see people who settle. Like one of my colleagues, she was like 14, and she has been together with the person who was 16 for her whole life, and they look happy, but it scares me in a way, because I don't know if this is actually a good match for her. Because that's the only experience she has in her life.
I mean, people change and develop over time, and I have seen plenty of examples of people that get into relationships very young, and then they sort of molded. Like I know a woman that got with her. She's 36 right now, or 37, something like that, maybe slightly older. And her man is a few years older, and they got together when she was 16. He was in his early 20s or something like that. And she said to me, it's like, I could never be with anybody else, because I could, like, she's a very feminine woman, he's a masculine guy, and she's like, I grew into him and I molded with him, and so the relationship like grew into this thing where they basically became parts of each other. And I think that is a wonderful thing, it's a beautiful thing, and it can work. I think for most people that's just not how it happens, because I think for that to happen, you also have to be lucky that you're compatible people to begin with, and then it grows into this thing. Because a lot of the time what happens is things start to move that way, and then something comes up that it's like, oh, this doesn't work or that doesn't work. So I do advocate for the healthy casual thing, but that doesn't have to be how it is for everybody. And there is a line where you might find you might find people that feel perfect and maybe you have no relationship experience, and then you get into this thing, but it just clicks and it just works, and you've got lucky. That's an indication of compatibility, and if things do genuinely just work, then that's wonderful. But there's a line between that actually being the case and that being the way that you feel, because you're you have high chemistry with this person, you're very emotionally invested, and so I think in relationships you have to balance the feeling, the way that you feel, and the love and the intimacy and all these things, and bringing that out of yourself and choosing to show up and feel these things, and the objective reality of the situation and your level of compatibility. And for some people it's all intuitive and you can figure that out very quickly, and for others it takes a lot more time to actually gain the experience to do that. And it's not an easy thing. There is no definitive answer as to where that line is, or how you determine that. But one of the mistakes I do see a lot of people doing is they get into relationships entirely based on how they feel, and then it doesn't work out because the feelings die after 6 months or whatever, and they realize, oh, this person wasn't actually right for me after all, or we weren't actually compatibility, or the first 3 to 6 months are like, yeah, we never fight and everything's wonderful, and then the honeymoon phase wears off and they have an argument and they realize that they just don't show up and solve compatibility in the same way, and then things break. And I think that a relationship is good for as long as it works, and then when it stops working, if it can't be resolved, then you have to move on, and a lot of relationships do end. And I think that could be avoided if people put more work in the first place into figuring out what is actually right for them. Because you can't just trust your feelings. If I trusted my feelings all the time, I would have killed myself years ago, or like I'd be getting into fights with people every time I'm angry, and like when I'm sad, the world's terrible, I'll just burn down my apartment. Like you can't trust your feelings all of the time. But there is a certain element of trusting your emotions and trusting your intuition, and like people say, trust your gut. That is a very important thing. Some parts of life are intuitive and some parts of life are very rational, and you need to be able to balance the two. You need to find that middle point where both are in alignment, and that takes work. Yeah. But this doesn't just pertain to relationships. People make the mistake of either being too emotional or too logical in either direction, and both lead to disaster. You gotta take the middle path. You gotta do the middle pillar. You know, the yin and the yang. You gotta find balance in life. In all of your decisions. So I try to make, like, sometimes important decisions come up and I feel a certain way and I think a different way, and I try to find the middle path, and that's usually the right decision. And if those things are in conflict, like you gotta figure it out. Sorry, on you go.
Oh no, it was just something simple. Like if I have a difficult decision to make, like A or B, I do like a coin toss. And whatever the feeling I have, if it lands, that's like, okay, that's when I know what the right decision is.
We talked about that a while ago, I think. It's like you toss a coin, and if you're unhappy with the answer, then you know what the actual answer is. It's like, yeah, do I want burger or pizza? And you flip the coin, and it's like heads for whatever, and it's heads, and you're like, oh, fuck, man. Then go for the other one. That's great. Another thing, me and my buddy Olaf do this. It's like we go on random.org and like do 1 to 100, and like 0 to 50 is no, and 51 to 100 is yes, and you just flip it 3 times and take the best of 3 if you're really uncertain about something. You're just letting God decide, basically, through coincidence and randomness. But yeah, I mean, your gut is very rarely wrong, but people don't know how to interpret it, and I've had problems with that in the past. It's like you know what you want, but you don't trust it.
Yeah, like a random answer that pops up in me right now is like, what are some tips for indecisive people? How to become better at making decisions?
I mean, I used to be very indecisive, and I've gotten better at that.
Too.
But I don't really know how. I think for small decisions, it's about just not thinking about it too much. Like, just, you know, whether you, like, say you're at a restaurant, you're struggling to decide what you want to eat, just fucking pick something. It really doesn't matter. If you don't like it, you get something else the next time. You're learning, you're getting feedback. And I think often indecisiveness comes from lack of experience or understanding. So you and this is something we've talked. I'll channel this into a relationships conversation. Like, one of the posts that I have in the community is called Know What You Want. And it's about going through that process of filtering and literally building a list where you're writing down what aspects of people you want, and then you go out into the world and look for that. Because there is this thing called the the paradox of choice, or the something of choice, something bad about choice. I think it's called the paradox of choice. And it's the more choices you have, or the more choices that you feel you have, the less happy you're going to be with whatever you choose. So if you feel you have less choices, you're gonna, like, if I give you a choice between 10 different things and you pick one, you're gonna be comparing with the others and wondering, like, what the fuck, should I have gone from something else? If you have only 2 choices, it's a hell of a lot easier to make a choice and be happy with the choice that you made. And so it's part of the process is refining and just trying a lot of different things. Because in the beginning, if you have like a million choices, if you don't take those choices too seriously and you just start picking a lot of different things and trying a lot of different things, you learn, like, oh, I don't like this, I kind of do like that, and you find aspects of things, and then that refines your taste to the point where you feel like you have less choice because you're more certain about what you want. And in relationships, how this works is, yeah, you go out, you date a bunch of different people, yeah, I like this, I don't like that, and then you end up with a very, very clear idea of what is best for you. Like, maybe a lot of different things work, but you end up with a very clear idea of the best possible thing. And then from there, all it takes is waiting for that thing to come along and stepping into it, and taking it when it comes. It's like, if you know, most people can probably say what their favorite food is. They like a lot of different foods, but if they had to pick one thing for the rest of their life, they probably know what that is, because they've eaten a bunch of different foods, and they know if they're a sweet tooth or a savory tooth, or they like this, or they like, and forgetting like the health implications, just purely based on taste. This is what I like the most. Maybe that's a bad analogy, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Also, like, something that I love the answer, by the way, but if you choose the bad thing, it's never as bad as you think it is. If you're okay with it being bad, then it does, like, take a lot of the pressure off the situation, which is like, it's just like all in your head again.
Yeah, it's a learning experience. Even when things go when things go badly in your life, or you suffer from failure, or something goes wrong, or a relationship ends, or whatever, if you don't learn from it, then it's bad. If you learn from it and you move forward in your life, and like, it's all cyclical. Things go right, things go wrong. The only real important thing is that the where you are at the moment, and the culmination of all of your choices, is a positive thing. Like, I look back at my life and some of the horrible things that have happened, and at the time I was going through it, I'm like, this is terrible. But now, I wouldn't change a single part, because I'm really happy with where I am now. I don't want to change it. Yeah, and when you realize that, it becomes very freeing. And also treating failures and treating bad moments in your life, and we've talked about this before, but treating it as a healthy and necessary thing. If you take the good with the bad. Anytime something good happens in your life, if that ends or it gets taken away, then you're gonna feel bad. And you can look at that and try and go through life avoiding pain, and then you just, like, take the absolute lowest risk behaviors all of the time. Or you can accept that you are a human being that is emotionally dynamic and capable of going through these things. Like, you're built to feel these things. It is a part of you. It's not going to kill you, and you will get through it. And then you become a far more robust, and you live like, your life is more dynamic. The ups are higher and the downs are higher, but if you exist in the middle of that and treat neither as objective reality, and sort of try and balance the two, then you can enjoy life a hell of a lot more, because you can experience a hell of a lot more of it without the fear. And what holds people back in most things in life is fear. Whether it be relationships, or it be your work, or just taking chances in life. You're scared of the consequence, and so you avoid doing the thing. Yeah. Not really, like, unless you want to become a lion agitator, and you want to do that as your job, and just, like, go into the jungle and tug on lions' balls. Like, that's probably going to kill you. That's a bad idea. You're reasonable to feel fear about that. But if you're like, oh, I want to be a traveling performer, like, just fucking give it a shot. Worst case, you're back where you started.
Yeah, actually, my next question is about this. It's what would your advice be to people who are too nice? Now, you made, like, in your previous explanation, it's more about the physical risks, like, the funny one with the lion.
Yeah.
But I think people who are, like, always acting too nice is because they are afraid of upsetting people, upsetting other people, that they will not be good enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're social creatures. Sorry, on you go.
Yeah. I used to have this problem myself, back when I started with you. And for me, it changed all because it was like you said, you drilled this concept of honesty in myself. And if I had to be honest against people, I actually didn't like to do this job, so why would I say yes to this job? And then I started like saying no to things that I didn't like, and it changed completely for me. But regardless of this, what would your answer be to people who are too nice?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's being too nice or too agreeable, or just trying to mold yourself to other people and never try to upset or offend people. And this is something that is becoming a cultural thread where people are just terrified of offending people, and it's creating wishy-washy, middle of the road bullshit. First of all, I think that it's healthy. I think conflict is healthy, and everything is created from either collaboration or conflict, and both can be good and both can be bad. And so like new ideas are formed when like two opposing ideas come together and they meet in the middle, and then healthy discussion and something dynamic happens and something new is born out of it that is the middle road and the new solution and whatever. Like conflict is a wonderful thing, but emotionally we're very social creatures, and we rely on each other for survival, or at least we used to. In a modern society, that's not so relevant because people are independent, and I mean, unless you get like publicly cancelled and lose your job or whatever, it's very rare that your survival is dependent on people's opinions of you now. But that's still like a primal part of us that we feel if people don't like us, I'm gonna end up sleeping alone in the woods, and if the fire doesn't work and I can't catch food, I'm gonna starve to death, or that fucking jaguar is gonna get me, right? We still have this like primal thing where we need other people, and the people that you have around you are the most important thing in your life, and so we want to make sure that that's good. And so your ego, the little voice in your head that comes up with reasons and excuses, and like the bit of you that you think of as you, that gives you all your thoughts and all of this stuff, your like self-concept, it's very, very good at justifying staying exactly where you are and not pushing boundaries, because it doesn't give a fuck if you're happy. It just gives a fuck if you're alive, right? It doesn't care how you feel. I mean, sometimes it does. People get big egos, but whatever. But for most people, it doesn't care how you feel. It just cares that you are alive. So it doesn't want you to do anything outside of the status quo, or anything that might upset people, anything you haven't done before. It'll come up with an esoteric reason as to why you shouldn't do that thing that is incredibly convincing. It's really good at doing this. And you'll notice this if you start to pay attention. Anytime you're scared to do something, you'll come up with a reason as to why you shouldn't do it, which makes sense, but it's always bullshit. Like, you can always pick that apart, and I do this with clients all the time. It's like, okay, let's take that fear and actually dissect it. Most of the time it's complete bullshit. It's just made up, but it sounds reasonable enough for us to be like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I should avoid the thing. And so people that are too nice are guilty of that. They're scared of offending or upsetting other people because they don't want negative opinion on them, and their entire sense of self is dependent on how other people feel about them. I think this is another aspect. It's very important to build up your own sense of self-worth, and to know yourself well, and to go out into the world and allow yourself to be polarizing, so that you can bring people into your life that like you, so that you feel a sense of security and you have friends around you that you know even if you fuck up, they're not going to leave. And that makes it a lot easier to be like that with other people. Whereas if all you've done your entire life is just gone around and been middle of the road, you're going to be surrounded by very middle of the road people and middle of the road connections and people that aren't really compatible with you, but they're just around. And those friendships and those relationships are incredibly fickle. And so if you do fuck up, those are the kind of people that are going to leave and are going to judge you and all of this stuff. Whereas anybody that's actually compatible and good for you is going to understand that human beings fuck up, and that just because you said a thing wrong or did a thing wrong, like they're not going to change their entire perception of you for those reasons. And so if you allow yourself to be polarizing and you go, okay, this is me, and I am going to be this person, and I'm going to express myself authentically and honestly, and say no to the things that I want to say no to, and say yes to the things that I want to say yes to, and stand by my opinions and my beliefs, and really have like genuinely good opinions and beliefs that you've thought about and you've not just taken from other people. It creates an entirely different paradigm where you start filtering people in and out of your life based on that. So the people that aren't really compatible with you will bounce off of you like fucking bugs on a windscreen. It's like they come into your life and you say something and they're like, oh, I don't like that, and they fuck off. But you don't care, because all of the other people that are coming into your life that identify with and resonate with that, you start to form bonds with them, and that can become dangerous because people create like echo chambers and things, and it's good to be constantly evaluating your own way of thinking and your opinions, and not just taking them from other people. Like everything we do is a reflection of something that we've taken in, but it's very important to do some sort of like transmutation process where everything that you take in, you evaluate and and you look at and you question and you look at the opposing side of it before forming your own opinion. Because people can get into groups and echo chambers where it's like they're like outside of society and they've created a wall around themselves, and then everything's just bouncing around in that thing, and they're incapable of taking on any other beliefs. That's really unhealthy. But for the most part, if you become a person that it's just more refined than the average person. You're not just the sum of the people around you, but your own individuated person. You create a filter that pushes bad people out of your life, or not bad, pushes incompatible people out of your life and brings in compatible. Whereas if you're just the nice person or whatever, and you're just going around trying to please everybody all the time, you're fucking lonely, because none of your connections are strong. None of the people around you are real, and it's just this sea of wishy-washy bullshit that doesn't actually mean anything. That's just a reflection of everything else that's in that pool, you know?
Through your whole explanation, I was thinking about myself before 2023. It was so me, the nice, agreeable guy. And yet, with the community and spending time with you, I learned how to be brutally authentically myself, and it's such a game changer in life. It's insane. And I now like attract people who I actually want to attract. Be
I
it in
didn't
super
pay him to
extreme
say
things
any
like
of this.
Muay Thai. Be it in super extreme things like Muay Thai or cliff jumping. And the way you connect with those people who are like so like yourself, it's such an amazing thing, and I wish everybody has this in their life.
I do think it's important. It takes a moment of breaking out, and for a lot of people, it's like they realize that they're just not happy and they want better friends, they want better relationships or whatever, and then or what happened for me, and the reason that I managed to do that for myself is I was lonely and I didn't have friends around me in the first place. And I was that kind of guy where I was just like trying to fit myself to other people, and like with my friends, I was just like, yeah, whatever you say is correct. Like I was just trying to fit in and be loved, and I realized that I was lonely and no one actually liked me and all this stuff. And so I just said fuck it, and I started becoming a little bit like nihilistic and going through life just being like, no, fuck it. And I became like a little bit edgy, and I started pushing boundaries with people just because I was angry at the world, and I was like, well, fuck all of you then, you know. But it counterintuitively, what actually happened, I thought that was just going to push people away further, because I was already isolated. So I was like, fuck it. And I was like, I'll just push people away further. But what actually happened is I started expressing myself authentically, and people started feeling more connected to me. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's something to this, you know? maybe if I am, and you know, my humor has changed and I'm less of a fucking asshole, because I used to be an asshole, right? I'm a lot less of an asshole than I used to be. And I care about people more. I have more empathy. But my directness hasn't changed. I've become a lot more polite about it. But I realized that by being direct with people, I was just like, the people that didn't like it, I didn't care, and then the people that did became my friends. And I'm like, okay, no, so the way that I behave dictates the people that are around me. Interesting, you know.
Ben, you talked about being empathic, or more empathic these days. But I never seen your empathic side on like the social freedom days. Then you become like a psychopath.
I don't think that's not fair. I get what you're saying. I know it's a joke, but that's not fair. It's for your own good.
Of course. It is.
You just don't like that when you come up with excuses, I say, no, fuck you, that's a bullshit excuse, you're gonna do it anyway. But I'm scared. I don't give a fuck if you're scared. Like, this is what you're doing.
And something I wanted to also fall back on. Earlier in our conversation, we were talking about responsibility. And I think this concept is, again, responsibility. Is being who you truly want to be, instead of like just conforming to the masses.
Yeah. Do the things that are important to you rather than the things that society tells you should be important to you. And a lot of that, when you really get to that, and I've been doing a lot of introspection recently and asking like, what genuinely is important. And it's all of the things that are like classically I'm like, I want to become stronger and more powerful and be able to defend myself and my family and get money and resources so I can take care of the people around me. And it's like, once I really start interrogating, what do I actually want beyond what society tells me I want? It's like all of the classical. I mean, it's all the classical things anyway. But I think a lot of people are very confused about the things that are important to them, because if you like, I don't care about like boats and hoes and fast cars and like all of that stuff is fun. I've experienced a bit of that in my life. Like, you know, I go around and sleep with a bunch of different women and all this stuff, and it's fun, but it's all just fucking ego. And I think it's important to evaluate the things that you actually want and the things that are genuinely fulfilling to you, rather than just like looking at perfume commercials and being like, oh, I should buy that smell because, and then you start to become like a fucking monkey and you're like, but smell good equals women want mating, yes, fast car, gold watch, and all these things are fun and they're cool, but they're not what fulfill you in life, you know? I can't remember what we were talking about before that or why I went on that rant, but I hope it was relevant.
Yeah, it was. We were talking about what were we talking about? About being oh, my question was, what would your advice be to people who are too nice?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I answered that.
Yeah, and I think my next question was going to be about, because my friends, they often have like things, they have difficulty with having difficult talks with people. For example, they have a girlfriend, she's okay-ish, but they know in the long term they will break up, and but they're avoiding having the conversation about having breakup.
Yeah.
What are some pointers you would use, or would you say it's the same advice as basically people who are too nice?
Yeah, I mean, with that example
talks.
specifically, I think a lot of the time what happens is these men or women, but I think it mostly happens to men. They get into these relationships and they don't feel like they're in a place where they're actually capable of getting something else, or it's more comfortable to be in a bad relationship than it is to face the reality of being alone and being single and in the dating pool, because most men are terrible in the dating pool. They don't know how to ask for what they want. They're not direct. They don't know how to actually get high quality women around them, and that they're possibly not even in a place in their life where they are deserving of that, because they like, what have they got to offer? They're not working on themselves. They're not becoming better men. They're not putting themselves in a position where they are capable of and worthy of getting these things. And so they just settle for mediocre relationships because they're like, oh, well, you know, it's easy and I get my dick sucked, and you know, and then they don't like the girl. The relationship's not even happy, and they know they want to break up at some point, but they're sort of waiting for a better opportunity to come along before they go through that process. And so part of it is the nice guy thing, where it's like, yeah, they're just fucking pussies and they're not capable of having a difficult conversation with somebody, and that just takes practice. Like the more that you realize that, like, sometimes you are going to hurt people, and sometimes bad things are going to happen, and sometimes things aren't going to work out, and you can shy away from that and be a fucking, like, what's worse, that relationship continues for another year of mediocrity and you waste more of that person's time, or they have to go through a breakup? Like, breakups happen. Everybody goes through this shit. It's not your responsibility all of the time, you know. But yeah,
it will happen regardless.
Sorry. Yeah, and it's gonna happen at some point. Like, what's worse, breaking up now and experience it? It goes back to the depression thing we were talking about earlier. It's easier to have a low level of pain than it is to go through the spike. For a lot of people, they're scared to fucking go through the spike, and so they just maintain the low level, which is worse because it just lasts for years. It's like I think most relationships that go badly, it's like they started going badly a couple of years before they ended, or at least several months. It's like they've been dating for 6 months and then it goes downhill, and then at the 2-year mark, the girl gets bored and she leaves him, and it's because the guy's being a fucking pussy. He doesn't know how to navigate these things. And then he becomes single and he's like, oh, I want my ex back. Not because she was actually good, but because he convinces himself that she was, because she was fulfilling some of his needs and he was getting his sexual needs met and some of his emotional needs met, because he's never actually done the work to take his responsibility as a man and start going out and meeting people and working on himself and becoming someone of value that can take care of things, which is what's attractive to women.
Yeah, so true.
And it's a sad existence, but it is what it is. And I don't just blame men for this. I think everybody should be working on themselves. Everybody should be taking responsibility over their life, men and women, and going, what can I do to show up and be the best version of me and find someone that is highly compatible? And if everybody did that, most people would be in really great relationships. Not everybody. Like, there's always going to be people that are the just can't do that shit, and like, they're capable of it, but there's always going to be people that can't. But most people, most people are capable of like applying themselves and working through. Everybody's capable of applying themselves and working through it. I'm just saying there's always going to be people that don't, and that fucking saddens me.
Yeah, and it's many more people than you actually think. We were having this conversation when I was in Sofia with you, and you said to me, like, Yeah, people who work on themselves are like in the top 1% because there's so many people who don't, and it's so true.
Yeah, there's this concept of the 3% rule. It's like if you're working 3% harder, you're putting yourself in the top 3% of people, because most people don't try. And most people are just not trying. Nobody's fucking trying. They think they're trying. They tell themselves they're trying, which is like a convenient excuse for them, so they feel like they're doing something. Most people aren't actually trying. Yeah, and all you need to do to set yourself, like I say this to clients that I take out on like the dating boot camps and stuff, and they're like, oh, I can just go and talk to the girl. It's like, yeah, and that alone, just the fact that you can go up and express yourself in a healthy and authentic way and create a safe environment where you're approaching them and telling them they're attractive, even if they have a boyfriend, even if they're not interested or whatever, it usually goes really well because you've separated yourself from the rest of society, and that's like a wonderful, noble, attractive thing. And when it does go well, it's the best thing ever, because it's like, oh my god, from the woman's perspective, and this is less true in like Latin countries and things, because men are more used to going and approaching. But in the West and Germany and the UK and like a lot of countries, it's like if you as a man start working on yourself and getting shit and become like this authentic, honest, but even if you have shit to work on, if you're honest and authentic and really grounded in yourself, and then you start going out and meeting women and actually talking to people and going up and being like, hey, I realize this is a weird thing to do, but I have to be honest, you're one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen in my life, and I'd hate myself if I didn't come up and say hello to you. I'd be going home and crying because I felt like I'd wasted this opportunity, and I feel like as a man I just have to say hello because something about you is drawing me to you. And then she's sitting there like, oh my god, this is so romantic, because nobody fucking does that. Nobody does that. Everybody should do that, but nobody does that. So if you as a man decide to start doing that, you are suddenly just like catapulted to the top of the options for this person, because everybody else, it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen a woman's Tinder account. It's like a lot of guys, they're on Tinder and they're swiping and they're not getting any matches, and it's bullshit because it's like a very vain. I have an article in the I believe I give it away for free in the Discord community, which is linked below, discord.gg/self-improvement. It's called You Should Delete Tinder. It goes through all the reasons why Tinder is like a terrible fucking platform. Like, all it's going to do is ruin your sense of self-worth. You're like, for most people, you're probably not going to get any good dates off of Tinder for a bunch of different reasons that I go into there. And it's like, for men, they get angry at women because they see their amount of, like, most women could go out and just have sex that day, probably within like 10 minutes of walking out the door if they wanted to, right? Because it's the guys that have to put themselves forward, and it's like we have more of a need for that, and women are more selective. And as guys, we look at that and we're like, oh, there's fucking bitches, because we're angry at their level of agency in that, because it's like they are it's just like, that's just the dynamic. It's easier for them to achieve it, but it doesn't mean that they want to. And most of the guys that are on offer, it's the same the other way around. Like, the men are going, oh, I need to get my needs met, and why can't I have sex? And that's like a big focus for a lot of young guys. And then the women on the other side are like, oh, these guys are just trying to fuck me, but they have absolutely nothing to offer, and nobody's got a fucking personality, and they just treat me like a piece of meat, and like, what the fuck is going on here? And so even though they have all of that opportunity, they don't want it. And so the guys are scrolling through Tinder not getting any matches, and the girls getting like 1,000 fucking matches and going, all of these people are terrible. Like, what the hell? Because on both sides, the people that are capable of meeting people in real life aren't on Tinder. They're just not. So you go out into society and you start actually meeting people and working on yourself, and not only does the level of people that you're meeting just go through the fucking roof, but your ability to meet people, like, it's shooting fish in a fucking barrel. It's so easy to just go out and talk to people and meet people that way once you get over the fear, because nobody else is doing it. There's no competition.
Shooting fish in a barrel, that's such a beautiful analogy.
I mean, it's a bad analogy, because I don't want to treat women like it's a fucking target or whatever. There's a lot of beauty and nuance to dynamics and relationships and connection and all of this stuff, but I'm just saying the level of competition that exists for guys like you and I, it's non-existent. It's non-existent. There's nobody else, because the only other people that are approaching women are either crazy people or pickup artists. And I released a video about that recently called Pickup artistry has a problem. It's if you go just to the main channel page, if you're watching this, you can give it a watch. Okay, I have to answer one of the community questions, because this has been in here for a while. I keep feeling bad that I haven't answered it yet, because I think his party's coming up. So someone in the community asks, I'm having a big birthday party coming up, inviting basically all of my friends from different places. I'm very worried that everyone will stay in their own group and they won't really communicate between each other because they don't know each other yet. How can I break the ice in such a big group while making it as comfortable for them as possible? So I think this guy's a bit younger, maybe like end of high school age, and things are a bit different there. Because it's like I throw parties in this apartment and I invite a bunch of people. People have described my parties before as a Skittles bag. It's like a bunch of different colors, but they all mix together quite well. And so I invite a bunch of people from like different walks of life, different age groups. Like some of them are in their 40s, some of them are in their 20s, and some of them do this, and they're all very different kinds of people. But it creates this like wonderful mixing pot where everybody's meeting someone interesting, unique that changes their perspective on things, and it always works because all of the people are good, friendly, open people. Because being the person I am, I attract good, friendly, open people, and so if I invite those people to parties, the parties work, and I never really have the problem of not be like people just not like nobody's doing the high school dance thing where they're sitting in the corner just looking across the room at the other people scared to go and talk to them. Everybody's very open and social because it's an effect of who I am and the kind of people that I meet. And you can do that as well as you get older. Like you'll meet better people and you meet better friends. And if you really work on that social side of yourself, the kind of people that you attract won't be creating this thing where you're scared that people aren't going to mix at the party. But part of that is because they're young, they're socially inexperienced. Like it's an effect of the kind of thing that's going to happen. So things that you can do about that. Like there is a reason, as shitty and like corporate bullshit as it is, there is a reason why in a lot of corporate structures they do like team building exercises and things like that, or exercises where like you all sit in a circle and you go around the room introducing yourself, because it does break the ice in some way, and it's a little bit forced and it does feel very awkward, but these kind of things do work. So you could implement something like that where you start inviting people in to play the game or sit in the circle and introduce each other, and then be like, oh, I'm into this and I'm into that, and then people like find it breaks the ice. Really, in social situations, a lot of the difficult work is just the introduction. Once you've gone over and said hi, things start to run a lot smoother. So you can do some sort of ice-breaking thing, or you can go around the room and just be like, hey, just find a person and be like, because people will like clump themselves into groups. So you go into a group and you go, hey, come over here, and you just bring the person into the other group, and then you go, hi, this is James. Like, if you met James, and then you just fuck off. And then suddenly James is talking to this other group. And so you could spend 20 minutes just going around the room doing that, because people will form into their clusters, and you just go in and you start pulling people from one cluster into another and just mixing people around yourself and forcing it to happen. Like, you're the host of the party, so you should be able to just go around and be like, hey, come over here for a minute. And then by the time they've realized they've been tricked and they're suddenly in another group where they're like out of their shell, you've already fucked off. So they're on their own. Like, it's going to figure itself out. It's going to be fine. But you can do that, which is I think kind of funny. And if you don't know people yourself, like one of the things that I've talked about on the stream before, and one of the exercises I've done with Anton and with certain clients is I say, play the mayor. So if you're in a room full of people that you don't know, walk around and introduce yourself to everybody. You walk in, you go, hi, how you doing? I'm Ben. Hi, how you doing, Ben? Enjoying your night? Great. Hi. And then suddenly everybody knows you. Everybody has like a concept of you, and then you can start to like do the thing where you mix and match people, and you learn who people are, and then you find people that are good and people that are not, and then you become known in that place. And as you get older, if you like going out to bars or whatever, if you go into a certain bar the first time and you do this, people are going to be like, does this guy own the place? What's going on? And then eventually, every time you walk in, there's going to be somebody there that you know, and so it becomes like a comfortable, safe environment for you. And going back to your question, all it really is just getting people past the initial introduction, because everything will work from there. And sometimes they'll end up in awkward conversations and they'll leave and go and talk to somebody else or whatever, but that's fine. All you're doing is trying to mix people. So just do whatever you can to just mix people and get them to introduce themselves to each other, and then everything will take itself from there. If it clicks, it clicks. If it doesn't, they'll leave the conversation naturally. But the thing that I would recommend to you is do what I suggested and just go into the little cliques and take a couple of people and put them in another group and just walk around doing that. And then at the end of the night, some people will come up to you and be like, why did you go and put those people were fucking weird? Why did you? And then other people will be coming up like, wow, I'm so glad you introduced me to this guy because this guy's really cool. And you'll see the effect of that. So that's what I would recommend. Do you have anything to say on this, Anton?
No, I was just following the conversation, and I could see you do it like completely. So yeah, but I think it's indeed a younger person's more problem, because I see with my friends group this wouldn't be the case. It's just
I mean, there are certainly I don't. It is more common among younger people, but I think this is a thing that happens. I think a lot of people still do suffer from this because it's just like a form of social anxiety. But if you, as a person, the person that asked this question, or Anton or whatever, I know Anton's done this already. If you as a person develop yourself to the point where you are more open and social, you're going to attract people that are more open and social, and then you won't be having this issue where if you invite a bunch of different people, they don't mix, because you will just attract people that are more open and will do that by themselves. Like when I'm at a party, my instinct is to go around and introduce myself to all of the people that I don't know, you know? And so if you behave like that, you're going to meet people like that. And so when you host a party like I do I throw a party maybe, you know, twice a year in this apartment, and they're always great parties. Everybody's always leaving in a good mood because everybody I invite is open and social and friendly. And so it all just mixes really well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think people appreciate it when you introduce them to new people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
yeah,
fun,
and then you become like everybody wants to be the person that knows the guy. So if you become the middle of that network of connections, you become more valuable to other people as well, because people can come to you and be like, hey, do you know someone? And you're like, yes, I do, let me introduce you to this person. And that's always a great position to be in. Networking is incredibly important. All right, I think that's a good place to wrap up. I think unless you had something important that you want to talk about before we close, because I know you had another question.
I have 2 more questions, but it's fine, we can hold them for next week.
Yeah, give us something to talk about when we come back, because I normally do these for an hour. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for coming. If you want to ask a question or call into the show, I really want to get people to start calling in because I think it'd be cool. You can go to discord.gg/self-improvement, link in the description. And then there's a section there called Off the Cuff, and there's a channel called Submissions. And you can choose to either put in a text question, and it can be whatever you want, and we'll do our best to answer it. Or you can call in and we'll go through like a screening process. And because I don't want people coming in and just like shouting racial slurs or whatever. But if you have a good question, something you want to talk about, we'll get you on the show. And we are back next week at 5 p.m. Sofia time. There's a little bit of fuckiness with the time zones right now. I think the clock's changed tonight. But like the West, like America changed like last week or something. It's every year. I hate it. There's a period of like a week or two where the time zones change. And it just fucks everything up because it's like everyone, like, they go an hour behind and then we catch up like 2 weeks later and it just confuses everything. I think I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant right now, actually, before we close. I think we should abolish time zones or at least daylight savings. I think we should get rid of daylight savings because it's fucking nonsense. Why is it 8 o'clock today and then it's 7 o'clock tomorrow, but it's the same time, and then my body gets confused and my sleep changes, and just fucking do away with all of it. We don't need that shit anymore. It's a relic of a bygone era. And then taking that even further, I think we should abolish time zones completely. And I think if it's 8 in New York, it should also be 8 in Mumbai and in Dubai and in Sofia and in Thailand. It should be 8 everywhere, because the time that you wake up and the time you go to sleep it's just a fucking number. It's completely arbitrary. Where if I say, hey, the call's at 5, if 5 is the same time everywhere in the world, it just makes everything so much easier. Anyway, maybe that's crazy, but I think that would be a great idea. Like I don't care if I'm waking up at 23 or if I'm waking up at 2:15. Like it doesn't fuck. It's just a number. It's arbitrary. So if we put the entire world on the same number, I think things would run smoother. And people always disagree with me with this, but I think they're just I think they're brainwashed and programmed into the time zone psyop. Wake up, sheeple.
Hey, there's also like this thing where if the clock goes back 1 hour, the heart attacks are massively increased.
Because people, when people lose that hour of sleep, I think it's 24%. Like the incidences of heart attacks go up 24%. You fact check me on that, but it is a high number. And then when the clocks change again and we gain an hour, they go down. It's like, it wouldn't be such a problem if people didn't have a work schedule that demanded they be up at 8, and so they lose an hour at a certain time of year. It's completely insane. So someone said in the chat, I agree, escape the time zone matrix. Yeah, it's bullshit. Whatever. Like if everything moved, it still wouldn't make sense, but it would make more sense if you're like, oh well, in the winter you go to work at 9 and then in the summer you wake up. It's just, the whole thing's confusing and bullshit. Let's just I think I should be elected Grand Emperor of the world so I can abolish time zones. It's my first and only decree. I will abolish time zones and then I'll retire to a sunny country with a harem of women. All right. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to end the stream right now. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.